Jesus had his ministry in a very short period of time when you think about it. What, 8, 9 years, maybe? And yet he was able to get 12 guys not only to follow him, but to follow and spread the message to the point, that they were willing to die over it. And so what was he showing them, really? Couldn't have been just words. I mean, there must have been false preachers all over the place back then as well, not just now. And so what was Jesus showing them? You ever think about that? Couldn't have been just words. It couldn't have been just words. Words are just a translation, right? So the most important part of this is the meditation. But I'm going to talk, way these things go is for the hour. I'm going to do the first part on talking about what's been on my mind. And again, it's just like everybody else on platforms like this, it's about what's on my mind personally, what's going on with me personally. And I really appreciate that a lot of people out there enjoy the personal story. They enjoy the personal journey of my experience. And there are a lot of other people that are like this out there and stuff. So I appreciate that, you know, it's gotten to the point where people like hearing your journey about this. So I get to talk about, what's important to me and what's happened to me lately. So on the other hand, if you have a question or a comment or something that you'd like me to address on the topic that we're talking about here, please let me know. Just write it in the comments. And if I feel that I can address it, I will. If I feel I need clarity on it, I'll ask you for that. And honestly, if I feel that it's not on topic, um, I'm just going to choose not to address it. But I may ask you to rewrite it so I can address things. Okay, so just feel free to ask questions or even the meditation, if you need me to do an energy shifting meditation around a certain kind of energy, um, a certain kind of challenging, difficult energy that you're having that may be causing a recurring problem. Okay. So, as I said, the meditations here are designed to be a somatic energy release. And what I've heard from people that done this with me is even on the recordings, on the videos in this account, they'll write in the comments, sometimes, not all the time, that the shift occurred, the energy release shift occurred before the meditation was done. And yes, I've definitely heard that before, or definitely after the meditation, they write in the comments, wow, wasn't expecting that. So this emotional energy release work is designed to work like in the time period of the meditation and beyond as well. I'm always open to hearing if it's helped people, because usually people tell me, weeks, months, even years later, the peace that they were able to get through the meditation stayed with them. And this is the reason I want to, you know, just give it out for free. I just want to help people and bring this out. But I do want to be clear about, what it's really designed to do, who it can help. Okay. So understand that all human brains are different. Neurologists are saying now that the human brain is like a thumbprint. All of them are individual. And we experience our emotions through our brains, the neurochemicals. All of our emotions are neurochemicals, right? And so if every brain is a thumbprint, then everyone's going to experience their emotions and their ability to control them on a spectrum. There will be people who experience their baseline of emotion way down here, which the reason I say way down here is because I don't experience mine that way. Uh, at a pretty good low baseline that's very, very manageable, that they don't even maybe even notice they're uptight, right? And so when some kind of anxious trigger happens or some kind of thing gets triggered, it goes up to here. But then there are people like myself who, due to generational trauma, our baseline of emotion starts at a higher place. It starts here. So when we get triggered, like when I get triggered, my emotions go high, way high above a place that honestly, I have friends who don't experience emotions like this. They're actually more than baseline down there, and they don't understand why I get upset over things like, I don't know, something worth $5, or why are you getting upset over, what this person said or something like that. Nobody chooses their initial reaction. That's why they call it an initial reaction. Okay. I mean, heck, I don't even know if people choose their second or third reaction, you know, to their initial reaction and stuff. So, but I totally understand though why it's so difficult for people to understand, for people to not be able to understand when people are very emotional, why they get that way. A lot of times people try to explain it away with logic or something like, if you just understand that this person is da da da, if you just know that da 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 da, and then you won't feel that way. And as a coach and a former drug counselor, I would say yes. If that's true for you and it works for you, that you can de escalate your emotions by thinking the right thought over and over again, then great. And there are people who can do this, you know. But understand again, I'm going to keep on saying this, all emotions are on a spectrum. Okay. And so there are people who never feel the kinds of emotions that certain people feel, especially at the baseline, and therefore they never feel such a strong, heavy spike in emotions like certain people do. And then as you move along the spectrum, there are people who do respond to like talk therapy. They respond to, reading a good coaching book or reading a good therapy book or, having a good coach or therapist or something like that through talk therapy. They're talking to you intellectually. Well, if you just thought this instead of that, then do you see in the person, oh yeah, that really, really helps. I read this somewhere, somebody told me something, and it's usually a thought-based, ego-oriented talk therapy, talk coaching kind of thing. And I am all for that. You know, um, I do a lot of emotional energy shifting work with people in my coaching sessions, and if I can do it with just regular talk therapy or coaching instead, I'll do it. Now, because I could see where they may be having a block and I'll talk to you about it first. And if I notice that the person shifts emotionally, I can tell a person shifts emotionally because simply they look less uptight about the topic that they brought to me. They just look more relaxed about it. And a lot of times you could see it in the eyes. They just look much more relaxed about the topic. They're not as uptight when they talk about it. And if it's done by talking, fine. Then there are people who maybe they need to hear the same message over and over and over and do it over and over and over again. But again, that works. All right. So a lot of times, speakers, these kinds of like spiritual speakers, law of attraction speakers, people who talk about, they say they do, spiritual meditation and things like that. They talk about the law of attraction. They talk about the law of abundance, where you think positive thoughts and positive things will happen for you. And people like that, they do say, and I totally believe them. I once had anxiety and depression. I had clinical anxiety and depression. But once I started to, you know, constantly change over my thoughts day after day after day after day, eventually for years and years and years, eventually all this went away. And now I don't have depression anymore. I don't have anxiety anymore. I don't need meds, things like that. And I believe them. I do believe these people. Again, everything is on a spectrum. I don't feel necessarily that people who say all I had to do was change my thoughts over and over and over and over and over again and write it in a notebook every single day until they changed, and even though it took years and years and years, but they did it and they say I don't have clinical anxiety or depression anymore and you can do this too. I don't necessarily believe that those people represent the full end of the emotional spectrum, because if they did, then everybody would be able to do that. I don't believe they represent the full end of how intense emotions can be and how much they could take over the body and start controlling your impulses. I believe they're way off to that side, but I once tried that as well. I used to teach that kind of thing as well. But I would notice that for as many hours as I was doing law of attraction kind of work, changing my thoughts over, doing journaling, meditating an hour or two a day, when a trigger would hit, it was like nothing I did ever happened that morning. It was as if the several hours of work that I would do every single day was totally out the window, right? And so, and I was doing that stuff for years to the point where I taught it. I even wrote a book about that kind of law of attraction kind of stuff, but I realized like, when certain triggers would hit, it wouldn't matter. And I didn't really know what was going on with my brain. And I started to get desperate and really despondent because I was doing just what they were doing. Right. So, what am I saying here? I want to be very clear about how this kind of emotional energy shifting work can help you. It's not a be all end all, it's not a 100% cure. Yes, you may see people who say, oh, because of this, my life totally changed. I'm a totally different person, and that's all I really needed, and that's all I really needed to do. I believe there are people like that. I'm the person that does this emotional energy shifting work to success with some people, and I still need psych meds. I still need to do certain things in my life. I'm the person that first did this stuff on myself, and it worked to a certain degree, but it wasn't enough. Okay, so what I'm talking about is there are people in which they do everything they can for decades, like me, psych meds, therapy, support groups, diet, sleep, exercise, supplements, minerals, retreats, change jobs, change religions, change careers, journaling, more psych meds, more, just trying harder. You're not doing enough. You need to do more of this, more of that. I was doing that for 30 years and was still having problems and stuff. So there are people that are way off to one side, and you should continue to do things that are helpful for you. Okay. The work and the book that I created was really designed for people like me, way off to the one end, multiple mental health issues, multiple addictions for decades, to the point where they've lost marriages, they've lost careers, they've lost relationships with their children, even. And they've done everything that they can, and they're still like this. Okay. So I actually designed this whole protocol for people like me that are like that. But then I also realized it sometimes the generational trauma and the multiple mental health issues and the things that it creates is so severe that the best that you can do is manage it. The best that you could do is manage it. The best you could do is create, if you're like a paraplegic, the best you could do is create ramps for yourself all over your house, all over where you work, so you can, function the best that you can. Okay. So this work is designed to help you with your emotions. But one of the key things that will help you with your emotions, if you're like me and you have these multiple mental health issues, ADHD, autism, bipolar, PTSD, schizoaffective disorder, leading to borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, basically leading to volatile emotional and mental behavior that lead to volatile, maybe even self-harming kinds of behaviors and all. Another aspect that will help you, in addition to all the other things that I suggest that you do, meditation, working with mental health professionals, having a spiritual life, having a support group, thinking about your health, diet, sleep, and exercise, supplements, minerals, all those things, is this. Let's see if you can see this. This simply radical acceptance of who you are and the way God designed you, because it's not a mistake. I was always under the impression mentally that in order to show my worth to other people, I had to do something for them. That my sense of worth was based on helping others or doing something, because my emotions and my mental health and behaviors are so messed up, and that I was causing suffering for myself and my family, that I didn't have any worth just being who I was. I had to do more. And so I became a drug counselor. I became a recovery coach. I became a meditation teacher. I became somebody who can help people shift in their emotions. And through radical acceptance and understanding generational trauma, I realized what God or the universe was really saying was just by being you, you are already doing a very sacred mission, resolving the generational trauma in your lineage. Because of you, others in your line, like my daughter, can go on. You're not as functional as her, but because of you, she's functional and she can, you know, create a future in my lineage genetically. And this is how humans populate. This is how humans continue, right? Through genetic lineage. So this is really important stuff. Okay. So because of the work, because of not just the work, because of who I am, because life chose that in this body and my brother's body, that a lot of the generational trauma was going to go into this body. And I took it all in. I didn't want this job, didn't ask for it. But because I took it all in, went through all this stuff, my daughter has doesn't have as much of it. And the other way you pass this stuff on is not just genetic. This is really important. And I'm finding this, I'm saying this kind of stuff. What's really important is not just you pass this generational trauma genetically, you also pass it experientially. Just like the idea, like you may have the gene for alcoholism, but if it's not triggered in you, if you don't go through a certain kind of abuse or something like that, or have certain kinds of experiences, it might not ever come out, right? And so those are based on whether those genes for dysregulated mental health or certain kinds of behavioral addictions come out is based on the experiences of that body growing up. And so I strongly believe that you pass along generational trauma two ways: genetically and experientially, through triggering, through abusive things, that usually a child is raised with. Okay. So because I didn't pass that on, I feel that actually at her age, comparative, and when I was that age, she's much more stable than me. And I see this also in people that, and I've seen this before, like I work with parents in which they are inheritors of generational trauma, but they also inherited resilience to adversity. They can function, they can hold a job, they can pay their taxes, but they end up, because they were children, they went through abuse and they pushed it down. It ended up going into their child who's just not as functional. And lots of times what I see is a household with multiple children, two even. I work with families in which there's two children, in which the generational trauma went into one, like the great majority of it went into one person and not the other. So in a way, because all of that trauma energy, which has to be purged out of your genetic line, goes into one person, that one person, in a way, saved that genetic line because the other person, the other sibling, is generally functional and fine and is able to have a family, is able to have children. A lot of times people like us, we sacrifice that. We lose our families, we lose our relationships with our children, or we don't have any relationships or children at all because we're too emotional. The mental health stuff is just too strong stuff. I lost my marriage, you know, and if you ask a lot of people like us, did we want families? Did we want to have children? Yes. Yes. We wanted what everybody else had, but our mental health was too strong, So I feel that we have a very important, almost sacred task. I'm not trying to say that we're special. Everyone is special. But when you have such strong emotional behaviors that you feel have been out of control for decades, now you're in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, and you're still like this, you know, you can get really depressed. And you need to know You have worth and value just by being you. And you helped out other people just because you were the purge of all this generational trauma that God or life chose you and not your sibling to put it into. And so just by living, you are completing your purpose on this earth. Okay. So whether you're like a total fuck up, drug addicted, angry, emotional, impulsive, behavioral problems, this is all signs, and you've always had this in your life. This is signs of generational trauma to me. You have strong worth in on this planet, on this earth. I mean, I have a feeling like maybe Jesus was one of us. Didn't he hang out with people who were considered undesirable, prostitutes, things like that, right? Didn't he teach you to love like the least of my brothers kind of thing? Didn't he also help people who were quote unquote possessed, people who others probably didn't want to interact with? Maybe it was because he understood them. Maybe it's because he was one of them. Maybe. I don't know. So this meditation that I'm going to do tonight is really about helping you to internalize this radical acceptance of yourself, your life, and the world and the way things are. Because, you know, everything is universal energy. And another name for that universal energy to me is God or God energy. And so therefore everything is God, right? And everything therefore follows the laws of energy as well, which is like, the building blocks of the universe, atoms are like 99% empty space. So you don't realize until you really can experience just how much of an illusion all of this is. And I'm not going spiritual here just for the sake of showing you some kind of parlor trick either. This kind of spiritual work, this meditation work, this energy shifting work saved my life because at the age of 50, after losing my marriage, which I loved dearly, after losing two careers and realizing was because of my dysregulated personality, I didn't find this. Actually, I was blessed by having a really strong spiritual experience, like a good 5 years before I lost my marriage. And that actually saved me because once I had that, I kept on following it. And so when I lost everything in my life that was important to me, I just hung on to that and followed through with that spiritual part. Okay, so this work is designed for people like me, to help people like me. Because I used to have friends that were just like me who are not here now because they died of suicide or they died of addictions or other stress related medical conditions due to their dysregulated mental health. And so I designed this protocol for people like me, but I do find that it is also very, very effective, possibly even more effective for people who don't have this stuff, who don't have these dysregulation conditions as much. They do report to me that this really, really helped them. So it's really for everybody. And so I just want to end this little talk before I do the meditation with explaining the way I see myself. I like to think of myself or people like us in terms of symbols. And so I heard this really cool symbol for people like us under the Japanese art of kintsugi. Have people ever heard of kintsugi before? Kintsugi is the art of piecing together broken pottery by gluing it together, but then you seal the lines or you powder over the lines with gold. And so once I heard that, and I even, what I was reading actually said people who go through generational trauma and the kind of healing that you do, your symbol, a good symbol for it is kintsugi pottery, that Japanese art of piecing together broken pottery. and sealing it with gold. And so I bought one. Once I, please don't break. Once I, once I heard of this, I bought one. And so what you have here is some kintsugi pottery. And so what this represents to me is I and people like me are like the vessel. And so all the pieces that are all the part of the generational line that I'm from, all the parts of unresolved trauma, I hold that in myself. And so I like the color red because it does represent, you could say, unresolved suffering and trauma and pain. And I like the symbol of a vessel like this. That's it's broken. It shows its cracks, but the art is it shows its brokenness proudly. And the idea behind the gold, using the gold here, you could say that it represents light that shines through the cracks. And so people like us, when we just by being who we are, we emanate a spirit, an energy, a light about us that shines through. And it's because of the brokenness of our nature, you could say, that the light is able to pass through. And thus, that is the beauty. And what I also like, this particular piece of pottery, one, I could afford it. But two, I was looking at these triangles, these black triangles that make it look like a jack-o'-lantern or something. But I was thinking, wondering what the symbol of the black triangle is, because I saw this thing on Etsy and I was attracted to it and I could afford it. And I was like, oh, I really thought the kintsugi thing represented me. But what do these black triangles mean? And it turns out one of the meanings back in Nazi Germany in the 1930s, when they began to round up people, it wasn't just honestly Jewish people that they were persecuting. They were persecuting anybody that they didn't like who they thought was undesirable. One of the people that they were doing this to were people with mental health issues, people who were undesirable because their mental health was too severe. And they had a whole system of triangles on the sleeves to represent certain groups of people. So when you got rounded up, they knew why. The black triangle represented people who had emotional health and behavioral health problems. Isn't that interesting? So I found this once I found out about the kintsugi, you know, the red. So again, the symbol of the vessel, I'm the vessel, or we are the vessel. The pieces are our generational line that we piece together and that we hold together until they could be free. The red represents the pain and suffering that we hold, and the black triangles represent people with mental health issues, because that's what the Nazis labeled and banded people with on their armbands with this black triangle in here. So I thought that was really cool and interesting. So anyway, let me just put this down here so I don't break it, because I get one second. Hold on. Okay. One second. Okay, so I'm going to do the meditation now. So I'm going to throw in that. Okay, so again, this meditation is designed to help you see and know that everything is the nature of God. There is nothing that's not. Okay. Just remember, everything that we think is separate. First of all, our eyes see in separation, our brains translate in separation. Everything looks like it's separate to the human ego and to the human brain. And it's supposed to be that way. Well, let me first say this as I go through this and why I'm trying to show you that everything is the nature of God. I'm not trying to say that the way you see things is wrong. Okay. Everything is God. Everything is the nature of the universe. So even if you have some kind of dysregulated ego like mine, there actually is no such thing as a dysregulated ego. There is only God. So it's like the millions and trillions of waves in the ocean. There is no one wave that's a mistake from the ocean's point of view. So if you think of God as the ocean and the millions and trillions of waves as us, or all this separation, there is no mistake there. No matter how the wave looks, what the wave is doing, what it does to other waves, there's no mistakes here. because God is the ocean and God does not judge any waves as bad or wrong. Why? Because the ocean knows every wave is itself. So, this is what I want to show you best that I can, that the nature of who you think you are, the life force in this body, is everywhere. Just like you are the ocean, believing that you're an individual wave. And that's not a mistake. Honestly, it's just the way the ocean likes it. You can sort of see that. The ocean likes making waves. That's not a mistake. So you're the ocean believing or thinking that you're an individual wave. And that's perfectly fine. For people like me, or if you have strong enough emotional dysregulation, it had a strong therapeutic effect on me to see this energetically, experientially.